Matthew Pfeiffer with MattPfeifferCoaching.com. Welcome to my YouTube channel. On this channel, I make videos about toxic, narcissistically abusive relationships. And if you have a question that you want me to answer for you, you can send me an email to justaskmatt@MattPfeifferCoaching.com. Again, that is justaskmatt@MattPfeifferCoaching.com. Just make sure you keep the email 2 to 3 paragraphs max, and you're also very direct and to the point of what your question actually is. If it's too lengthy or if I don't understand what your question is, unfortunately, I will not be able to get to it. Also, make sure you hit the subscribe notification, and you also hit the bell notification so you're notified each and every time I upload a new video. I upload new videos on this channel 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. With that being said, let's get into this email. So this email comes from a person who is in a relationship right after a divorce. It sounds like this person moved from one person to another, pretty close to the divorce situation, and they unfortunately moved into a very toxic, very abusive situation and is wondering what to do. And this is more common than what people realize. And this is the reason why it's so important, right, for you to have some time to yourself, some time to heal, go through therapy, things of that nature, and get right with yourself and begin to get into a routine of self-love and a self-love journey after relationships, right? And I say relationships, period, because quite often people assume that means when people say heal after a relationship, people think that it's only in a toxic relationship. No, all of them, right? It's important for you to reestablish yourself and your identity as an individual person first, right? Because then that's going to let you know what type of person that you are going to want to be with, what type of relationship that you're going to want to be with. It's very difficult to make those type of decisions when you are in the process of healing. Do you need to be perfect? No, you don't need to be perfect, right? But you do need to have a good sense of identity of who you are. And let's get into this email so we can further explain. So this email reads, "Hi, Matt. I have been dealing with a narcissist for over a year, and I don't know how to get it out, and everyone is saying that it's me." So this is something that's very common, so I want to address this part where this person says everyone is saying that it's me. No one knows, right? For those of you who are listening to this and those of you who might be experiencing this, the only people who know what's going on quite often, and sometimes people even in the relationship don't know what's going on. Here's the reason why, right? It's blurred lines. That's a large part of the reason. That's a large part of the issue in these type of relationships are the blurred lines and the lack of boundaries. So you can't tell who's who, right? You can't tell where the argument started. And especially when we're talking about narcissistic abuse, right? Quite often, things are so subtle, and sometimes things don't actually have to be said to start an argument. And then you have people that are in hypervigilance and overreacting and reacting out of trauma. Quite often, the person who is yelling and screaming and things like that might be in reactive abuse. And so, this is the reason why I always compare toxic relationships to traffic. That, you quite often people are complaining about being in traffic. They are running late to work, and it causes a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety, and no one likes traffic. And then you start to realize, I'm also a part of the traffic. That I'm here in traffic. That the fact that I'm in traffic, I'm also stopping other people's way, right? And the only way for us to discover and to put those pieces back together and for us to heal is to remove ourselves from these situations and to begin to take responsibility for the things that we may have done, and then also acknowledge that, this part was not my fault and things like that. But when you're in it, it's very difficult for people to see. But the only person that's going to be able to see that is if and when you remove yourself from the situation. So let's continue with this email. I want to be here. So that she makes it very clear, I want to be here with him. At this point, I got separated from my husband and I met him. Things went super fast, and I allowed for him to convince me to do some things financially that I shouldn't have. And that's very, very common. Quite often, narcissists will test you very early in the beginning to see if they can kind of see what they can get away with you. Now I'm over 80K in debt because of this. This is what potentially can happen in bad relationships and toxic relationships. We're only talking about this person mentions that they've been together for a little over a year. Now $80K in debt, right? And this is what I'm talking about with a lack of boundaries, right? And a part of her probably feels like she needs to be able to do this to keep this relationship alive. There's a lot of codependent traits in here, right? So let's continue with this email. This entire year has been arguing, break up, get back together, verbal and physical abuse. And we also can throw financial abuse into that mix as well. So we have a whole cycle, right? You can hear the cycle in this. Arguing, break up, get back together, verbal abuse, physical abuse. Yeah, quite often you hear me talking about the narcissistic cycle of abuse. Love bomb, devalue, discard, right? And it just continues to go round and round and round. So this email continues, I love him and I'm at a point, I know all of this is wrong. This is where you start to hear some of the trauma bond. I know that all of this is wrong, but I can't seem to walk away, right? That describes an addiction. I know that it's wrong. One of the things we have to talk about when we're talking about a trauma bond is quite often the victim knows that it's abusive. They know that it's wrong. They know that this person is not likely going to change. But quite often people don't want to experience the pain of leaving. They don't want to experience the pain of being by themselves, the pain of dealing with their own emotions. And the abuse actually has the potential of becoming more familiar. And I don't know if this person was abused in their previous relationship with their ex, right? However, we do need to understand that this describes a trauma bond. They know that this is wrong. This email continues, I used to think it's because of the financial abuse, but is it really, or am I just stupid? You're not stupid. That's not the issue, right? And for those of you who are listening, I know that's very common for people to think that maybe I'm just stupid. That's not the issue, right? This has nothing to do with intelligence. Lack of intelligence, nor does it have anything to do with lack of intelligence, right? Well, a great majority of this is emotional, right? And chemical and things of that nature, and upbringing, right? You're used to it more than likely because of your upbringing. I have a feeling that your ex was probably abusive, at the very least, verbally abusive, because if we're at this extent with this person, the likelihood is that you're used to this type of treatment. And so the last sentence in this is, I don't know what to do. And so this is very, very common. And so one of the things that we have to understand is that when we're in a situation like this, when we are saying to ourselves, should I stay or should I go? Everyone goes through their stages of change, right? And when we're going through a stage of change, right, we go through these stages and we may know that it's wrong the way that you're describing, but the problem is that we don't know what's on the other side. We have to get you to what's considered the action stage, where we're so comfortable with the change that we're ready to put into action. So how do we get to an action stage? And we're clearly not there yet, right? We're not there yet. And this is the reason why you may have heard in other videos where I tell people, I never tell people what to do, because if they're not in the action stage, if they're not ready for it, right, you have the potential of causing more harm and more damage, right? So you have to allow for people to discover some of these things on their own. So what's important for you right now is to educate yourself on this type of behavior, for you to educate yourself on what happens if you stay. Right? I have videos out there on other platforms, and they might actually be here on YouTube as well, of what happens when you stay. Right? I can tell you right off the bat, abuse aside, right? Even if the physical abuse stops, just the fact of all of the other abuse, right? When we're in a toxic relationship, your body is going to begin to break down if it hasn't started already. Right? You're going to start experiencing headaches, possible fibromyalgia, possible body aches. You'll start to develop possible autoimmune issues, right? There's a lot of side effects that happen when you stay in relationships like this. Hair loss, weight gain, weight loss. There's a lot of physical effects. You literally start to die slowly. There's a reason why a lot of people take pictures, before and after pictures, when they're in a toxic relationship and things of that nature. And I don't know if you have kids, it has large impacts on kids. And the longer you mentioned that it's been a year. So think about this. You know that it's wrong. It's already difficult for you to leave. We have 80K in debt, right? Physical abuse. We know this person isn't going to change. Imagine how much more difficult it's going to be 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road. So what we need to do is to continue to educate ourselves by watching videos like this. There's actually a book called Should I Stay or Should I Go that I would highly recommend. You can find that on my website, mattpfeiffercoaching.com. All of those links are down below. I have all sorts of recommended books, but it's important for you to educate yourself on not only what things would be like if you were to stay, but also what would happen if you were to leave. What does that look like? What does healing look like, right? For you to be able to decide on and make a very clear decision on what type of life that you want to live. But the other thing is that we have to understand that one of the things that is very clear, this behavior is not going to change, right? And this has the potential of getting very, very ugly, right? Because here's one thing that people don't talk about. When we're in a toxic, unhealthy relationship, and let's say that this person is using you, quite often the codependent, they want to stay in the relationship and they assume that that person will never leave. What if the well runs dry and they use up all of your money? And this is what happens quite often, right? People forget that the narcissist also can discard. So if you're, and I hate to talk like this, but this is the reality of being in a relationship like this. Let's say your looks start to fade, right? And because this is the impact of being in an unhealthy relationship. I'm not someone who says that people should stay together because of looks or anything like that, but that's the reality of being with a narcissist, right? Is that quite often if your looks start to fade, if you don't have quite as much money in the bank as what you do now and things of that nature, right? Eventually what happens is that supply that they're there for, right? Once that runs dry, the potential of them discarding you, right? When you are at your lowest point becomes very, very high, right? So we also have to remember that. And so we have some very good patterns here. I shouldn't say good patterns. What I mean by good patterns is we have enough of a pattern, right, to know who this person actually is. This is not healthy behavior. It's not going to change. It's more likely that this type of behavior is going to get more dangerous over the course of time. So thank you very much for writing in. For those of you who would like for me to answer a question of yours, make sure you send it to justaskmatt@mattpfeiffercoaching.com. Again, that is justaskmatt@mattpfeiffercoaching.com. Make sure you keep the email 2 to 3 paragraphs max. You're also very direct and to the point of what your question actually is. Unfortunately, if it's too long, if I don't understand what you're asking, I will not be able to answer it. If you need my help, the fastest way to connect with me is to join my Toxic to Triumph community. That is linked down below. With that being said, thank you very much, and I will see you in the next video.